Welcome to Are You Quizzing Me? I am Vineet Nair with my co-host Aditya Kashyap. This is a quizzing trivia podcast show. Join us as we dive deep into history, science, pop culture, and so much more. Let's get quizzing. And we're back for episode number 85 of Are You Quizzing Me? Your favorite quizzing and trivia podcast show. Aditya and I are back for another round of quizzing, and let's start off today's episode with the audience question. For those who came in late, the audience question is that question which I ask at the start of every episode and which I reveal the answer to at the end of the episode. The audience question for today is: during the mid-1990s, when Tata Motors were flourishing in the automobile sector, an individual named Sumant Mulgaonkar was one of the brains behind the company's success. Often known as the architect of Tata Motors, being the chief executive of Tata Engineering and Locomotive Company, called Telco, Sumant was always inclined towards a progress for the better approach for the company. This saw him frequently skipping his lunches with the top brass of the company and instead visiting highway dhabas to have lunch with truck drivers who drove Tata truck. This he did to get real-time feedback about their vehicles. He then later passed on this information collectively to their R&D team. This helped the company to improvise on their product in an overall sense. When his co-workers got to know about this, the team decided to pay homage to Sumant. What was this tribute to Sumant Mulgaonkar? I will reveal the answer to this question at the end of today's episode. So, let's get to our regular round of quizzing, and I will start off today's episode with a question that I cannot call my own. This question is from a dear quizmaster friend of mine, Dr. Chandrasekhar, who specializes in making the kind of questions I love. So he used this question in a recent quizzing group, and I'm borrowing it for this podcast. So the question is as follows. Aditya, before she distinguished herself as a successful author, she graduated from the Alabama School of Fine Arts in Birmingham, USA, as a theater arts major. The title of her book features the name of a bird whose prefix means something, making fun of someone or something in a cruel way. The book sold 450,000 copies in the first week of release, exceeding the publisher's expectations, and also received much critical acclaim. I want you to identify the author and the book.
Harper Lee to Kill a Mockingbird.
See, why do I even bother asking you questions? Is what I would have said if this was a question that was crafted by me. But Dr. Chandrasekhar is much wilier than I am, and so let me tell you, the answer is not Harper Lee and To Kill a Mockingbird.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
Okay. That's very interesting. Then it has to be something like a Mockingjay. Hunger Games.
Yes. I'm not going to drag this on. Yes, it is Suzanne Collins's Mockingjay.
Yeah.
The trick here is both of them are natives of Alabama, but Harper Lee was a student of law and she never actually graduated, while Suzanne Collins was a theater major who actually did graduate.
Interesting.
So, it is Suzanne Collins and Mockingjay. You got that on the second time around, but kudos, again, props to Dr. Chandrasekhar. He specializes in these kind of what we like to call afsos questions. So, you say afsos, it is not the answer. So, yeah.
Very cool. That is unexpectedly cool. Yeah, I like it. Okay.
So, take the baton, Aditya.
So, we did a version of this question a few times in the past, and I'm going to do one more today. This is the guess which year all of this happened in.
Okay.
Okay. So, the biggest or perhaps the most memorable or iconic event is the Hindenburg explosion. Margaret Mitchell won the Pulitzer Prize for her novel Gone with the Wind. The first commercial flight across the Pacific, operated by Pan Am, also flew in this year. So two air-related iconic incidents. One very unfortunate Hindenburg explosion, and the other a rather great thing, the first commercial flight across the Pacific. Another pretty momentous occasion in history, Adolf Hitler informed his military leaders in a secret meeting of his intentions of going to war. Any clue as to when all of these events happened, Vineet?
Okay, so couple of things. You said Margaret Mitchell Gone with the Wind was released?
No, it won the Pulitzer Prize.
It won the Pulitzer Prize. Okay.
Yeah. But since you ask, or I guess I just want to plug this in, a pretty iconic book was first published. It was The Hobbit. It was the year The Hobbit was published.
Okay. I think I've narrowed it down to the 30s. So this will be the 1930s. Because, as you said, the Hindenburg and the Nazi Party, because even before you mentioned, I was fairly thinking of the 1930s because the victims of the Hindenburg were famously draped in swastika-laden coffins while on the New York port while they were waiting for a ship to take. So there's an iconic photograph from the Time magazine of the Nazi flag in New York. So I'm fairly sure it's the 1930s. I can't narrow this down to the 1 or 2 years, which I usually do. I'll have to have a 5-year gap in this one. So I'm thinking somewhere between 1932 and 1938. You said Hitler announced his intention of going to war. I'll try the fag end first. So my first guess would be 1938.
No, not 1938.
Then I'd go for the former, so it'll be in the 1934.
No, it's not 1934, but it is in between these years, so you're pretty close.
Oh God,
I'll tell you a few people who were born in this year.
Let me just guess before you give me any clues, because this is my final guess, but I can try to guesstimate. I had turned this out because I wasn't sure if it's the same year as the Berlin Olympics, so I did not do it. So is it 36?
No, it's not 36. It isn't 36.
So I have just 2 years left. And one guess.
That is true.
So.
Yeah. Go for it. Give me one last guess.
Dude, it's either 35 or 37. Since you said Hitler's decision to go to war, I'm going to say 37.
It is 1937. You got there eventually. Well done.
I was very close with the first one. 38. Nah, I was 1 year off with my first guess.
If you had just gone down that route, you would have ended up on the second guess over there.
Yeah.
Listen to this. A bunch of interesting people are born in the same year. Somehow this always blows my mind. I'll give you a few actors. All of them born in the same year. Jack Nicholson, Morgan Freeman, Dustin Hoffman, Jane Fonda, Anthony Hopkins, Bill Cosby. So some iconic names there, some infamous names there as well. Other people born in 1937, Madeleine Albright, Saddam Hussein. These are people born in the same way. And the last person I wanted to mention was Billy D. Williams. Just because I like this guy.
Lando Calrissian.
So all of these people were born in the same year. And that to me is just somehow very, very mind-blowing every time I learn of this. So a lot of iconic events happened. Once more, The Hobbit was published, like I mentioned. Actually, I was going to give you one more clue, which was Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, premiered in the same year.
Okay, that would have helped me a little bit more. Because I would have gone with 37 or 38 if I knew about the Snow White thing.
True. Adolf Hitler informed his military leaders on November 5th of that year. May 6th, earlier that year, Hindenburg explosion happened. I also mentioned first commercial flight across the Pacific. That was April 28th. And Margaret Mitchell won the Pulitzer Prize on May 3rd. So all of this happened in 1937. Well done, Vineet. I give you props. You narrowed it down pretty successfully. Every time I ask this question, I always try to imagine how I would do. And I come up very short. I would be off by easily a decade. Be like 20s, 40s, 30s.
I'm still actually kind of pinching myself for not going from 38 to 37. I should have just gone with my first instinct, but that's the fun of these kind of questions.
I think this is the reason I enjoy this question is because I usually do not like the guess which year this happened or that kind of stuff. That's not really fun. But when you put them in context of multiple things happening in the same year,
Yeah.
then you're like, oh, that's rather interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that brings an end to my question. But Vineet, it's your turn now.
So this question has, let's say, two parents, in the sense that I had actually asked a version of this question in a quiz as part of a special round. And lo and behold, the same question, but in a slightly different form, was sent to us by Arjun Srikumar. So I'm going to honor his suggestion and ask you his version of the question. After which, after you answer it, I'll tell you what my version was. So the question is as follows: Peter and the Wolf is a musical composition written by composer Sergei Prokofiev in 1936. The narrator tells a children's story, which the orchestra illustrates by using different instruments to play a theme that represents each character in the story. For example, the bird by a flute, the duck by an oboe, the cat by a clarinet, the wolf by three horns, Peter by the string quartet, and so on. This was made into a Disney animated short film in 1946. It is not known if Prokofiev was aware of this, as by then he was already behind the Iron Curtain. Several other adaptations have been made of Peter and the Wolf, including stage shows, jazz versions, a Sesame Street adaptation, and even a parody version produced by Weird Al Yankovic. In February of 2004, the Grammy Award for Best Spoken Word Album for Children based on Peter and the Wolf was awarded to actress Sophia Loren along with X and Y. Can you identify X and Y?
So you give me a lot of history. I have to ask, are these like people who were long dead and they were posthumously awarded?
Okay, one of them is alive. The other has passed on.
This sounds suspiciously like your question where Putin was the answer for the song.
Yes.
So I'm assuming it's not a famous singer or some sort of
this is not
actor.
this is
I'm
a
assuming it's
spoken word
somebody
album,
else.
right? So it's not a singer anyway.
Sorry, yeah. So not an actor or singer, whatever. Not a musician or anybody known for that kind of work.
No, I can tell you that X has appeared on multiple TV shows. TV shows, matlab, I think the more apt term would be interview shows, something like the late night and that kind of thing, right? And Y has famously appeared in a commercial, a very, very famous commercial.
That could easily be a sports person or a politician or I don't know, somebody from the field of science.
Okay, I'll give you another additional clue. X famously appeared on a talk show while playing the saxophone and wearing a pair of dark sunglasses.
This is Bill Clinton.
Oh, very nice. Okay, so X is Bill Clinton.
Yeah.
Who is Y?
Because I think he recreated that image or that resurfaced recently. I have a very vague memory of this happening. Bill Clinton with the saxophone.
Yeah.
Okay. That would be Bill Clinton, Sophia Loren, Bill Clinton, and because we've done entertainment and we've done
so
politics,
Bill Clinton did the English narration with Loren, and Y said the Russian spoken word sections, which were then translated into English.
Oh, see, I was going to guess an American sports person, but now you said Russian. So then...
very famous Pizza Hut commercial. That's my clue for you.
Oh, no idea what that is. But Russian in 2004, right? You mentioned? Gorbachev is the only name that comes to mind. Is it Mikhail Gorbachev?
It is Mikhail Gorbachev. So you have very successfully guessed it.
Very cool.
Yeah, so the spoken word Grammy went to Sophia Loren, Bill Clinton, and Mikhail Gorbachev. So my version of this question was for a special Grammy round.
Okay.
Arjun Srikumar sent me this beautiful question.
Okay.
Thank you, Arjun. And keep sending me questions. And tougher ones. This bugger answers everything. So tougher questions.
Okay. All right. That brings me to my question. And since you spoke about an American president, I'm going to talk about yet another American president and how that American president inspired the name of someone very iconic. So the president in question is Ronald Reagan. Jose Diniz Aveiro was a big fan of Ronald Reagan, and I think more so for his movie career than his presidential term, but perhaps both. And he decided to name his son in honor of Ronald Reagan. Do you know who is Jose Diniz Aveiro's son? A very famous man himself who was named in honor of Ronald Reagan.
I have one word for you: Ronaldo.
Oh boy, that was very quick. That was extremely quick. Have you read of this before? Did you make
No,
an
I mean,
educated
like
guess?
Ronald
How did
Reagan
that
and
happen?
Jose, that automatically becomes Ronaldo. He's not going to name his kid Ronald, right? So then, yeah.
That is a very, very educated guess. Yes, I love that because that is the right answer. He himself was an interesting man. Unfortunately, died before he saw his son rise to the stature and fame that he eventually did. Died in 2005. Was forced into military service, fought an unpopular war to prevent the colony of Angola winning its independence from Portugal.
Oh,
It was a war that was lost, and one in which he and his fellow soldiers saw atrocities that left a stain on him mentally. And the living conditions are appalling. All of that stuff, which is terrible about war, he had to face. After all of that, after 13 months in Africa, he came back to Portugal, and it was in a terrible state. The economy was really bad at that point in the country. He decided to take up a job as the equipment manager for the local club Andorina. And as the equipment manager for the local club, he eventually had a son and decided to name him after his favorite actor slash American president. Not a lot of people fit that bill. Ronald Reagan, and Cristiano Ronaldo was hence named. And I was pleasantly surprised by this lovely piece of trivia.
with that kind of a name, he cannot be anything apart from a Republican. He's named after both Jesus Christ and Ronald Reagan, the two biggest people in the Republican Party.
That is true. That is true. That is true. Yeah. So that is a little brief history of Cristiano Ronaldo's father and how he came to name his son Cristiano Ronaldo. Passing it back to you, Vineet.
Okay, so in some Orthodox Jewish beliefs, people of a certain priestly lineage are forbidden from being under the same roof as an ex, as it could contaminate them. Due to an unusual interpretation of this rule, around 1,500 priestly families are unable to use the London metro system. This is because South Kensington station is connected to a Y, which contains a type of X on display. And since the metro system is entirely underground, entering any metro station would be considered being in the presence of an X. Despite requests from these families, local governments refuse to sever the connection between the station and Y, as they believe easy access to scientific knowledge is of greater importance. I want you to identify X and Y. So I'll just brief the question if it sounded a little confusing.
Mhm.
So certain people of a priestly lineage in the Jewish faith are forbidden from being under the same roof as an X. Okay. Now, because of an unusual interpretation of this rule, they are not able to use the London metro system because the South Kensington station is connected to Y, to a type of thing called Y. And in Y, there is an X on display. So, what is X? What is Y?
I want to say a pig because you said Jewish
okay.
and contamination. So some sort of a statue of a pig, but that sounds weird. I don't know of any iconic pig statues. So am I close or am I
No,
off the mark?
you're on the right track, but it's not a pig. As in, I already mentioned it's something that they believe could contaminate them.
So a pig would not be kosher. I know in Islam, I think dogs are also considered like a little, not the cleanest or whatever, I guess, whatever adjective it is. Yeah.
Dogs are considered
So
unclean in the
I'm
Islamic faith,
just.
but it's not dog.
Oh, okay. So not a dog either. Interesting. Not a dog. So is it an animal of any kind, or am I supposed to look in another direction?
You could say it's an animal.
You could say it's an animal. That's painfully vague. South Kensington Station. I have no clue about London iconic landmarks either. I don't know. And you said access to knowledge. So some sort of museum, some sort of library.
Okay, so I'll give it to you. Why is a museum?
Why is a museum? I'm sure there are like a bunch of. Is it the what is the famous the British
No.
Museum? I
It's a
guess I don't know.
museum. It's a museum. I don't expect you to know the name of the museum or anything. You've identified that why is a
Okay, got it.
museum. So what is
Okay.
it the what that is housed in why that would make the entire London underground metro system unclean to around 1,500 families?
You could say it's an animal. That's again so painfully vague. I have no idea. No, yeah. Is it some sort of like representation of devil, or I don't know. I have no idea.
Okay, so there was this 2019 horror film called The Vigil, as in Vigil.
Okay.
That would be my clue to what this is. This is central to the plot.
clue has a clue has to help someone. Like, how am I supposed to get there without
No,
it being
this was
helpful?
a very very good horror movie. Very creepy horror movie. It's got 91% on Rotten Tomatoes. I had hoped you would have seen the movie, but okay, so then I'll have to come up with some other clue. Okay, what clue can I give that's not giving this away?
Oh, let me take another guess at this, because you said it is a couple of things that you said. It's contaminating, and it is something you shouldn't be in the presence of, and also could be an animal. That ridiculously annoying clue that you gave.
Okay.
I'm guessing, is it some sort of human remains that you're perhaps not supposed to be in touch with?
Yes. So here basically it's a skeleton in the medicine gallery of the Science Museum. But that counts
Got
as
it.
human remains or corpse to a line of
Hmm.
Jewish priests called the Kohanim. So, because
Mm-hmm.
in their religion, anything that is connected to something that houses a corpse is unclean or contaminated, it means that they cannot travel in the tube. Basically, they can't use the London Underground metro system. And
Mm-hmm.
for those who've not seen it, I would highly recommend The Vigil. It's a supernatural horror film based in the Jewish faith. It's basically about a guy, a young Jewish fellow who is sitting vigil over a corpse. So he's from the Orthodox
Mm-hmm.
Jewish community, and he's been asked to keep vigil over the corpse of a Holocaust survivor who had recently died.
Okay.
And it is a very creepy movie.
Must check it out.
Yes, definitely. Please do. I've always found that when it comes to horror movies, movies about faiths or beliefs to which we are not very familiar tend to be scarier for some reason. I found for that
Hmm.
reason Indonesian movies quite scary. I found certain Turkish movies which feature supernatural elements from the Islamic faith quite scary. I found Jewish movies quite scary. So, but I'm
Hmm.
so used to exorcisms and the power of Christ compels you, and demons possessing, and everybody is doing something that some version of the Exorcist. So that's become quite blasé by now. Even though the Koreans do a good job of making that a little scarier, but in general, I found like alternate approaches do make it quite interesting.
This just puts me off on a complete tangent, and we have recommended this in the past in our pop culture recommendations. I Am Legend by Richard Matheson.
Yes.
In that book, there is this part where he's describing, because the lead character, which was eventually played by Will Smith, I'm forgetting the name,
Hmm.
he is doing his research and trying to figure out, just gathering more scientific information about these zombies who are called vampires in the book. And he mentions this thing about how the vampires are scared of crosses is a myth, and it only is true if the person who has now become a vampire slash zombie
Believes in
was a
it.
Christian to begin with. So they would be scared, but show that same cross to a zombie who used to be a Muslim or zombie who used to be Jewish, they would not be scared. And again, of course, it's fiction, but I love this kind of leap in imagination that Matheson took in this book, where he's like this idea that somehow you point the cross at an undead person and they will be repelled immediately is nothing more than what they believe in themselves, or they used to believe in themselves.
Yeah.
So kind of a corollary to the point that you mentioned about how other cultures might scare you when you're watching a horror film, but your own culture is so deep seated that even after you die, quote unquote, it still repels you.
Yeah. And just another pop culture recommendation that just comes to mind right now is this movie I watched a couple of years ago. I think maybe a year and a half ago. It was called Poochandi. It's a Tamil language film, but shot entirely by Malaysian Tamil immigrants. So people who are of Tamil
Hmm.
origin who are settled in Malaysia, and it is surprisingly effective. It's a very low budget film. You can just make out from the way it's been filmed that they've done. I mean, like, it's a labor of love, but they didn't have all that much money to do it. But it was a very surprisingly intriguing and creepy movie. So which enjoyed. I think it's available on. I think it's Amazon Prime Video, but just a simple search will get you to. It's on Prime Video or Netflix, one of the two. But it's a fantastic
Okay,
story. So I would recommend Poochandi as well as The Vigil.
cool. I will check it out. Okay, so we haven't done an out and out etymology question in a while. I guess we keep doing it, but this one is as etymological as it can get. So I'm going to tell you possible origins to this word. You just have to tell me what the word X is. A little bit of background. The only certain detail about the origin of the word X was that it was first noticed in American English around 1890. It has been dated to Western or Northwestern United States around that phase. So there are multiple possible etymologies to this word X. I'll give you a few. The first one could be a derivation of a word that means farmhand. So the first etymology is a word which I'm not mentioning, which means farmhand, and from that word, X is derived. Second one is a greeting. Again, not mentioning what the greeting is because that would be too much of a giveaway. The third one is a syllabic abbreviation of where a train might be moving towards. So that
Okay.
a syllabic abbreviation of that. And the fourth one is a railroad greeting. So these are the four most famous origins. There are a couple more actually, but these are the four most famous origins of the word X that I have told you, which was first noticed in American English around 1890. Can you try to guess what word is X?
First thing, when you mentioned a farmhand, the first word that came to mind was cowboy. But I don't know how the rest of the clues would fit, so I don't think it's that. Can you give me those clues once again, the various etymologies? So you have origin from a farmhand.
Another could be a greeting on a farm as well. The third one is the syllabic abbreviation of where a train might be heading, might be going. And the fourth one is a railroad greeting.
No, I have no clue. You'll have to give me something.
So I actually will point you back to something you yourself said. You mentioned cowboy. And the first one that I had said, farmhand, and I told you there's a word which means farmhand from which X is derived. The word itself is the derivation for X potentially. That word, the second half of that word is boy. So you were quite close with boy. It's the first half that if you figure out, I think will lead you very easily to X.
Absolutely nothing. Okay. Different words that end with boy that could possibly be used on a farm. Stable boy or water boy? No.
Think of a gardening tool.
Hoe boy.
Yeah.
Wait, that's it? That was
That
just.
is that is that is the word that is I said, which means farmhand. But what is X then? That is derived from ho boy.
Wait, what's derived from oh boy? I was guessing it might be oh boy.
So I'll give you one
Oh
more
boy.
hint, and it was
Oh boy.
along the lines of what you had already said. So I told you the syllabic abbreviation of where a train might be headed. This was specifically to do with trains that soldiers were taking to go back home
Oh god, this is
after
hobo.
the Civil War.
This is hobo. Hobo. Oh boy, hobo. Oh god, that was just staring in my face. Yeah, hobo. Yeah. The moment you mentioned trains, I was like, oh,
Okay,
this is a
lovely.
hobo.
Exactly. Ho boy, which became hobo, or a greeting, which was ho boy, like a HO boy.
Oh.
Oh, bo, Beau,
Hmm.
is a railroad greeting that is also a
Ooh.
potential origin for hobo. And the one that I love the most was the syllabic abbreviation of homeward bound, which is how
Okay.
trains were described when they
Yes, yeah,
were
makes
carrying
sense.
soldiers back from Civil War. And a lot of these people who eventually turned out to be tramps or hobos who are taking these trains or using these trains to go around and get around. So hobo has all of these potential origins. Nobody's quite sure where it came from. But that is a lovely etymological question that Vineet, you were just circling around it, just right around there.
Yeah, it's the
So
obvious ones
yeah.
that kind of get you. So moving on to something which was obvious, which I did not get, into something obvious which is meant not to be gotten, because we are going to talk about a cipher. So nyctography is a form of
Mhm.
substitution cipher writing created by X in 1891. It is written with a nyctograph, which is a device also invented by X and uses a system of dots and strokes, all based on a dot placed on the upper left corner. Using the nyctograph, one could quickly jot down ideas or notes without the aid of light. X invented the nyctograph and nyctography as he was often awakened during the night with thoughts that needed to be written down at once and didn't want to go through the lengthy process of lighting a lamp only to have to then extinguish it. The device consisted of a gridded card with 16 square holes, each a quarter-inch wide, and a system of symbols representing an alphabet of X's design, which could then be transcribed the following day. He first named it a Tiflograph, from Tiflos for blind, but at the suggestion of one of his brother's students, this was subsequently changed into nyctograph. So, who is it that invented the nyctograph so that they could, jot down ideas in the dark without having to look, and which also coincidentally formed a good cipher system?
Interesting. It just feels vaguely familiar, like I have heard of this or read about it somewhere, but not anywhere close to cracking this question. So I would need a hint, any sort of hint, actually. Yeah, I have
Okay,
no
so
clue whatsoever right
X
now.
X has worked in the fields of geometry, linear and matrix algebra, mathematical logic, and recreational mathematics, producing nearly a dozen books under his real name. X also developed new ideas in linear algebra, including the first printed proof of the Rouchet-Capelli theorem probability and the study of elections and committees. Some of this work was not published until well after his death. His occupation as a mathematical lecturer at Christ Church gave him some financial security. His work in the field of mathematical logic attracted renewed interest in the late 20th century.
Just because you said this thing about him being a mathematician and a teacher, I am tempted to guess because I remember this is a question we did very early on in our podcast. Uh, this is Lewis Carroll.
Yes, you are right. It is Lewis Carroll, real name Charles Lutwidge Dodson. Early listeners of our podcast may remember that we had a question based on Lewis Carroll before and his background as a mathematician.
Hmm.
So he was not just an author, as many people remember. He was an author, poet, mathematician, photographer, and also an Anglican deacon. So, a man who wore many
Hmm.
hats. Probably because he didn't like his hairstyle. Have you seen it?
I have seen it. I have seen it.
Yeah. So, Lewis Carroll of Alice in Wonderland fame invented a form of writing in the dark, which is called nyctography. So, it's very difficult to imagine by describing to you. So, I would encourage all our listeners to just go online and search for nyctography, and you would see a nyctograph and the cipher system, or at least the blind writing system that he developed, which you could use to write in the dark. So, Aditya,
Mhm.
let's move from the dark into the light. Shine thy light upon this podcast.
I shall do that. And you know what? Since you spoke about somebody iconic and somebody who has left their imprint on pop culture, I'm going to ask you about another such person. And the context is, who is this, let's say, character, because it's not really a person. Who is this character who is only the third to have their own zip code?
I know I'm going to get enough sauce for this, but I am going to bite the bullet and, fall into the trap head first. Anyway, is it Santa Claus?
Oh, no, Santa Claus is not the right answer. We have spoken about Santa Claus and how I think he has the H0, H0, H0
Yeah.
zip code.
Yeah.
I should have actually been a little bit more specific. The United States Postal Service has given a zip code to people, or I guess characters, in only 3 occasions, and the third one is this particular character. So, at the H0, 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 by the way, is Canada.
So the third person, or third character rather, who got a zip code from the USPS. And what other clues are there in the question?
Actually, it's very interesting what even the first 2 are. So, if you want to guess all 3, that will be great. But the third one I told you is a character.
So, okay, it's a character who's given their own America. So, Paul Bunyan?
No.
Let me just try and break this down logically. So, if you needed to have the USPS has a specific zip code for this person, then it's somebody to whom they used to write letters.
Mm-hmm.
So, a lot of people would have to write letters. Americans writing letters is, you mentioned that this particular is a character, right? But is there a real person who played this character?
Yes, but not initially.
Okay, because I was thinking of Mr. Rogers. I hear he used to get like hundreds of, or maybe thousands of letters.
Yep, he did. So this was a similar case where it was kids who were sending most of these letters.
Yeah.
So in that sense, you are on the right track, but not Mr. Rogers, no.
And
actually, you want to, before we get to the number 3, you want to take a guess as to who number 1 and number 2 are.
Oh, okay. Now
not characters, actual people.
Okay, those are actual people with their own zip code.
Who do you think gets a whole lot of mail in America?
I'd say the President of the United States, 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue.
Lovely. So POTUS has his own zip code, has their own zip code, as it might be the case soon if Kamala Harris wins. So POTUS has their own zip code. Do you know who number 2 is?
Number 2, who gets a lot of letters? Apart from, she said Santa Claus, that's in Canada. So, any clues?
I'll give you for the second person. Second person is actually very much related to the first person. It's almost a subset of the initial person's.
Oh, is this Flotus?
Yeah, you're right. It is Flotus. In the future might be the first husband of the United States as well.
Yeah, but that doesn't have that same flow to it. You can't have Flotus.
So POTUS and first spouse of the United States, I guess.
Yeah.
Fosotus?
No.
Fosotus and POTUS have their own zip codes.
Okay.
These are the 2 real people. Who is the third, who is a character and not an actual person?
The Yogi Bear? No, it's not Yogi Bear. No. What am I thinking?
Ooh, you are very close. You are dangerously close to the answer.
Wait, what? Yogi Bear? Okay, now I'm really confused because I was making a joke out of it because of the Yogi Bear and the fire and all those cartoons that used to happen. So, what plot am I close to? Is it because I said it cartoon or is it because I said bear?
Literally everything you said so far is very close to the actual answer.
Something else, please.
I don't know what to say when you have got it so close.
Okay, Yogi Bear.
It rhymes with Yogi Bear.
Okay, now see, this is the problem. You shouldn't give me something that's so obvious and then. Oh, God. Uh,
The only possibility I can imagine is you haven't heard of this character, but that would be very, very unlike you. It's a pretty famous character.
Yogi Bear, what the fuck?
I'm going to give it to you at this point, Vineet, because I feel like it's just one of those things that you know it, you're gonna hit yourself once I tell you the answer. The answer is Smokey Bear.
Oh
Smokey
God,
Bear.
Smokey. Yes, Smokey Bear. Yeah, Smokey. Yeah, God.
Smokey Bear, the very iconic American campaign and advertising icon of the United States Forest Services for wildfire prevention campaign. You literally mentioned fires, you mentioned smoke, Yogi
Yeah, the
Bear.
problem is I think I was confusing Yogi Bear with Smokey Bear in my head.
That's what I thought. That's why I was like, you were so close to the actual answer because I don't think Yogi Bear was associated with fire
I know.
safety
Now
as such.
it is. I was thinking of Smokey Bear in my head. The image is that of Smokey Bear, but for some reason, Yogi Bear is the one that came into my head. Yogi Bear is also a cartoon character, and the name Yogi Bear was superimposed over the image of Smokey the Bear in my head.
Hmm.
I blame sleep
That's all
deprivation,
right.
my dear audience. I blame sleep deprivation.
We both do. Vineet is better than this. We all know that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll tell you what it is. Very quickly, Smokey Bear was extremely popular, especially when he came onto the scene as an advertising campaign. Obviously, he was a fictional bear and used to receive so many letters, more than 13,000 a week, mostly from kids, that in 1964, the United States Postal Service gave him his own zip code, 20252, which is still in use, by the way. At some point, because you asked me, has anybody actually played this character? So there was a little bear that was given the title of Smokey Bear, and who lived for a while. And so there was a living, breathing Smokey Bear for a very short while. Continues to be a character, obviously, beyond that. And that is those are the three individuals who have their own zip code as given by the United States Postal Service. We were almost there.
Almost. Close, but no cigar. I think that's all the time we have on our episode for our regular questions. Let's start winding up. So, moving on to the audience question, which I had asked at the beginning of today's episode. During the mid 1990s, when Tata Motors was flourishing in the automobile sector, an individual named Sumant Mulgaonkar was one of the brains behind the company's success, often known as the architect of Tata Motors. Being the chief executive of Tata Engineering and Locomotive Company, also known as Telco, Sumant was always inclined towards a progress for the better approach for the company. This saw him frequently skipping his lunch with the top brass of the company and instead visiting highway dhabas to have lunch with truck drivers who drove Tata trucks. And at the same time, to get a real time feedback from them about their vehicles. This was later passed on to the R&D division of the company so that they could improvise on their products in real time. When his co-workers came to know about this, they decided to pay homage to Sumant. What was this tribute to Sumant Mulgaonkar? Aditya, any ideas?
This would be Sumo.
Yes, very good. So the iconic Tata Sumo was named after the initials of Sumant Mulgaonkar when it was released in 1994. Well cracked, Aditya. I hope at least some in our audience would have guessed this. So great crack. So moving on to our the last segment of our podcast, the pop culture recommendations. Aditya, what's your pop culture recommendation for this week?
Okay, so I'm going to recommend, as I usually do, I'm going to recommend a few movies. Yeah. Okay. So, like I usually do, I'm going to recommend a few movies. And I don't know, I feel like I'm in the mood for something a little romantic, a little bit of love. So I'm going to say Brokeback Mountain. a movie
Okay.
that I have watched multiple times and I still really like a lot. The Before trilogy. Recently, it just reappeared on somehow on my Instagram reels, and I was caught up in a
The Romance of Ethan Hawke.
and I was caught up in the romance of Ethan Hawke and Julie Delpy. Yep. So the Before trilogy, which is 3 films, the film I mentioned, Brokeback Mountain, which is about 2 men, and the lesser said, the better, because you should just watch it if you haven't. The third one that I would recommend is The Lunchbox. I believe a beautiful film. Irfan Khan doing a phenomenal job and a pretty great cast actually overall. So yeah, Nimrat Kaur and Nawazuddin Siddiqui, just great acting, great performances. So these 3 films worth checking out. And if you're in the mood for some love, by the way, also a recommendation. Well, I'll take that one as well. In the mood for love. So 4 recommendations. Wong Kar-wai films any
No,
day.
technically, it would be 6 recommendations because the Before trilogy is a series of 3 movies.
I cheated a little bit, but yes, you're right. 6 recommendation, yeah.
So I'm guessing today's podcast recommendations are all going to be all movies because I've already mentioned The Vigil and Poochandi, both of which are in the horror space. And I would also now like to recommend a new, recently released Malayalam film, Kishkinda Kandam, which is again from the same Kishkinda Kandam of the Ramayana. The name comes from there, but the story is something different. Don't read any reviews, don't read any synopsis, don't do any spoilers. Just go watch the movie blind and prepare to come out with your brain lying in pieces on the floor. That's it. That's all I'm saying. You literally have to watch this movie with zero preconceptions and just be prepared to be amazed. But let me just also warn you, it's a very slow burn thriller. Don't expect something that's heavy and the thing. It's very slow burn. It's very cerebral, and it just builds and builds to a very unexpected climax, which I did not see coming.
All right, cool. I'll check this out.
Okay, so that's all the time we have for this episode. Thank you for listening in. We hope you enjoyed the show and learned something new. If you liked what you heard, please consider subscribing to our podcast and leaving us a review on your favorite podcast platform. It helps us reach a wider audience and allows more people to discover and enjoy the show. We would also love to hear from you, feedback, suggestions, and trivia. You can reach us out on Instagram at Are You Quizzing Me? You can send us questions that you want asked on the show by emailing us at areyouquizzingme@gmail.com with the name of the quizmaster who you want to ask the question in the subject line. You can join our community subreddit at r/Are You Quizzing Me? And thanks to Aditya, all our episodes are now available on YouTube. So you can search on YouTube and listen to our episodes with our entire back catalog on YouTube as well. We appreciate your support and look forward to sharing more episodes with you in the future. Thanks again, guys, and have a great day.
And let me once again remind, if you liked any of our episodes, please do recommend it to a friend who would love to listen to it as well. That's the best way for our podcast to grow. So do that, and we'll see you guys next week.
Ciao.